Most of you guys that have watched this channel for a long time know that my long-term goal is to be an airline pilot. One of the essential steps that most people take in that journey to build up experience is to be a flight instructor. So at this point, I've been an instructor for about a year and a half. At the place that I currently work, I get the opportunity to mentor the new instructors that we get. And I think all of them kind of have the same sort of reality checks when they start. So I just wanted to make a video talking about what some of the realities of life as a flight instructor are. Single-handedly, being a flight instructor has been one of the most rewarding jobs that I have ever had. At the same time, it is also one of the most frustrating jobs that I have ever had. The moment that you get to send a student solo for the first time, they're flying a plane all by themselves, or when you finally get to shake their hand after they pass their check ride, it just, the feeling of gratitude and accomplishment that you get, and your students are absolutely ecstatic for it, and we're all smiles and all happy. That's where this job really shines and steps above the others. But it's the moments where last flight, a student did really, really good, and you're thinking, yeah, he's ready to go, she's ready to go, they're gonna solo on their next flight, and then on the next flight, they can't land the plane. And you have to keep that frustration to yourself. You can't get frustrated with the student, because then they're gonna get discouraged. So it can be extremely, extremely rewarding and extremely frustrating, and being a flight instructor is about so much more than just being an instructor to teach students. You're often their mentor in this industry. You are a cheerleader for them when they beat themselves up over something. Sometimes you guys spend a lot of time together, sometimes you turn into their therapist. So I want to talk about some of the rewarding aspects and then some of the challenging aspects of this job. So if you have any interest in aviation, then if you've looked into this path for any amount of time, then you understand that flight instructors don't make a lot of money. This is by far the biggest challenge. I'm not going to talk about specifics about how much I make at my current company. I'm not going to say where I currently work, but I'm in Indiana, and I'm going to talk about kind of the general demographics of flight instructors near where I'm at. Most flight schools only pay their flight instructors for flight lessons and ground lessons. That's it. So if you're getting to the airport early to make sure everything's ready, you're not getting paid for that. Giving your student the rundown of what you guys are going to do before the flight, you're not getting paid for that. If you're debriefing them after the flight, you're not getting paid for that. You're only getting paid from the minute the engine turns on to the minute the engine turns off. Seems like kind of the industry standard around my area is around $20 per flight or ground lesson. Some places pay more, some places pay less. It really just depends. Some pay you like an hourly wage, just like a normal job. The minute you walk into the door, you clock in and you clock out just like a normal job, and then sometimes you get incentives on top of that. But overall, it seems like the average instructor around here is making about $20 per flight hour or per ground hour. So almost like the max that I've seen kind of people get in a month is right around 100 hours. And I mean, that is 40, 50 hours a week at the airport, grinding off for a month straight. If you accomplish that, that's $2,000 a month, and that's pre-tax. So that's $24,000 a year pre-tax. Most flight instructors are coming straight out of flight school, where if they did it the college route or the route of like ATP like I did, chances are you've got quite a bit of student loans that you're having to pay for. This most of the time, this is like your first job kind of out on your own, and you're struggling to kind of learn how to pay new bills and manage all of those finances while barely being able to scrape by. A lot of flight schools pay in the form of flight hours, if that makes sense. They understand that you're willing to work for cheaper because you're building up hours to then move on to the next step. And a lot of the times you're working, but you're not getting paid for it. So like the debrief that you're doing with your student in the lobby after the flight, you're not getting paid for that. Or coming up with lesson plans, you're not getting paid for that. Things like that. Now, like I said, some places are different. Every pay structure is different. Some places are going to pay you to just come in and sit at your desk and work on these things. Chances are it'll be a very small amount, but it just depends. So you're a flight instructor not for the money, but you're a flight instructor for the hours. The sooner that you can acknowledge that you're not going to make a lot of money as a flight instructor, and that you're getting paid to become a better pilot, getting paid to gain those experience, as opposed to this is the first time in your career where you're getting paid to fly most of the time. So you're no longer having to pay for these flight hours, you're getting paid for them. It's a small amount, but you're still getting paid. One of the next challenges that I want to talk about is this job is an emotional roller coaster. You could have one flight where this student is just killing it. They're finally grasping it. They're nailing their landings. They're nailing their maneuvers. And then that flight ends and you move on to the next one and you have a way more experienced student that's struggling with the basics. So you go from that high to low, and I've found often it's challenging to be able to separate each flight from each flight. If you start your day with a really crappy flight and you as an instructor get frustrated with the situation, you have to try really, really hard to not let that carry over into the subsequent flights of the day, because then you're going to be taking it out on students that haven't done anything wrong, and they might be on top of the world, and then here you come just getting done with a crappy flight, and then they're going to end up having a crappy flight. But like I kind of mentioned at the beginning of this video, is it so extremely rewarding when you can finally get your student across the finish line, when they finally pass their check ride, when they finally get to solo, whenever you get to hit that big milestone, whenever they do their first solo cross country. Every time you hit one of those milestones, you just feel that overall sense of appreciation, and the passion returns, at least for me. One thing that you learn being a flight instructor is patience. Patience is key in this industry. Often you can tell the student the same thing in 9 different ways, and then the 10th way that you tell them the same thing, you just see a light bulb click in their head and they get it. And you don't know exactly what to say, because one of the key things to remember is that every student is different. Every student learns different. I don't have any teaching experience or teaching degree. I just know how to fly planes. Now, in your CFI training, you do have to learn a little bit about the fundamentals of instructing, but really that's just reading from a textbook. It's so different when you actually get to go out into the world and teach those things. Every student is different. You have to adapt your teaching style to every single student. The way you teach one student isn't going to work with another. Patience is key. All right, another thing I want to talk about is the lifestyle of a flight instructor. If you are getting into this industry expecting a nice, cozy, predictable 9-to-5 job, you are way wrong. First off, my schedule at the place that I work now is open 55 hours a week. I don't need to be there if I'm not flying, but my students, when they get access to the scheduling software, they can book me for 55 hours per week from 8 a.m. to 7 p.m. 5 days a week. Now, some places do it differently, where the instructor schedule's just open all the time and students just book it, and those are going to be more like your 1099 contractors. That's a little bit different. On top of the not typically having a consistent schedule, or if you do, it being a lot of hours, you also have things to battle like weather, or maintenance, or students getting sick, or you getting sick. So you could have an entire full day of flights. You wake up in the morning, you think the weather's going to be great, you look outside and it's overcast, super low, and all of a sudden you just went from having 5 flights today, getting close to 8 hours of flight time, to getting none. And if you're in one of the positions where you're only getting paid per flight hour, you just saw a $160 day go down to 0. When you are a flight instructor, it often consumes almost your entire life. A couple months after I first started my CFI position, we moved into winter. This would have been last winter in Indiana. Indiana winter sucks in terms of weather. So I opened up my schedule from 5 days to 7 days. So I was open for 77 hours per week. The reason I bring this up is because you get burnt out so quickly if you're not careful. With your schedule being open so much, your social life is going to take quite a hit. A, you're not going to have the time to go out and hang out with your friends. B, you're not going to have the money. C, if you just got done flying 8 hours, working 11 hours, you're going to be exhausted. You're going to be dragging you're not even going to be able to form sentences when you're done. You're going to be so mentally drained from supervising students, making sure that they're not trying to kill you for the last 11 hours. Burnout is a real big thing in this industry. But on the other hand, there's just something special about being able to share your passion with this next generation of pilots and teach them safe habits and being around airplanes for all day, every day. This kind of relates back to the emotional roller coaster aspect that we were talking about. It's super easy to get burned out when you're making no money, when you're having frustrating moments with students. But oftentimes you have to just take a step back and remember, wow, I'm getting paid to teach people how to fly airplanes. It's a pretty cool gig. It's definitely a grind, but it's definitely a grind with purpose. You're building up hours, you're building up experience, and most importantly, you're helping people achieve their dreams of becoming a pilot. And you're right there guiding them through that process, helping them learn, helping them understand all the aspects of it. So with everything I just mentioned, a lot of you guys are going to be like, wow, is it worth it to be a flight instructor? I'm going to say the answer kind of depends on the person, but most of the time the answer is yes. If you're thinking about pursuing aviation as a career, flight instructing 99% of the time is not the final step for you. Rather it be the airlines or charter or corporate or any other professional flying gig. They're not going to take you at the 250 hours that you get your commercial certificate at. That's just not going to happen. Most places aren't going to look at you unless you have 1,500 hours. The airlines aren't going to look at you unless you have 1,500 hours, unless you go to college, but that's a different topic for a different video. It's absolutely worth it because as a flight instructor, you're getting paid to fly, and you will be flying more hours than all your other peers that don't do flight instructing by a mile. When we compare being a flight instructor to somebody like a banner tower down in Florida, which is another kind of popular way to gain flight hours, you have to think, I'm probably going to get double or triple the amount of hours that they're going to get. So if I'm a flight instructor for 2 years, they could be a banner tower for 5 or 6 years. The way that personally I like to think of it to help kind of justify it to myself is at the end of my career at a major airline, I could be making $300,000-$400,000 a year. So if I take, and if you don't know this in aviation, in terms of the airline world, you have a mandatory retirement age of 65. So if I'm time building for an extra 2 years, even an extra year, then at the end of my career, I'm sacrificing $400,000. I don't know if that's the healthiest way to think about it, but that's the way that I think about it that makes it a little bit more justifiable is, yeah, in a lot of ways, this grind isn't the best, but at the same time, if it's going to give me an additional $400,000, $300,000, $200,000, whatever it may be at the end of my career, then absolutely, it's worth it. So overall, being a CFI is one of the most challenging things that I have ever done. It's also one of the most rewarding. Seeing a student pass their check ride is a feeling that I can't really put into words, kind of like a proud dad moment, even though I don't know what it feels like because I'm not a dad, but I think you guys get what you're saying. You feel proud, you feel rewarded, you just feel satisfied knowing that they're gonna move on and do bigger and better things. Overall, it's a grind, but it's a grind with a purpose. All right, that's all I got.